there's a decent chance that jank is actually not the fault of the person doing the translating. There was some kind of a process problem where the person doing the translating couldn't get enough information about it. Like one of the things we learned was that apparently when they were doing the voice acting for Oblivion, the voice actors were given all of their lines in alphabetical order.
Butterscotch.
Hey everybody, welcome to episode 406 of Coffee with Butterscotch, the game dev comedy podcast of Butterscotch Shenanigans. I'm Seth and I'm the games programmer.
I'm Adam and I do various things.
I'm Sam and I'm the artiste.
And this is a show where we talk about life, business, and working in the games industry. Today's JohnFlavin 2020 or 20 Jubilee. I almost actually said the actual year. That's not allowed anymore. It's cursed. Before we get started, we have a warning. There's going to be profanity in this show. So if you have a small child around, make sure to get them closer to the radio so they can pick up some new words.
Alternatively, get your pearls on so you can clutch them.
Yep.
Mm-hmm. Buckle your pearls. Mm-hmm. Okay, this is happening. We'd also like to thank our recurring supporters over at moneygrab.bscotch.net. Thank you very much for letting us grab your money. All right, so some stuff happened.
Yeah.
Let's talk about it. Sam, did something happen? Did you?
Yeah, I went on a drive with my wife, and then when I came back, there was another person in the car. You know?
Oh my God, like a murderer in the backseat?
Well,
in some ways,
sort of killing a past life. You know what I mean? Like just sort of moving on into the future. Mm-hmm. Yeah, we had a baby.
Yay!
A little bit ago.
She came out.
She came here. Right
she's
out.
A person now.
And
well, she's working on becoming a person because it's just it's a process.
She's
more like a tiny screaming raisin right now.
Sort of in a larval state. She's very cute though, I will say. I'm very happy with that.
She has gotten much cuter just like in the past because Dan had sent some pictures yesterday and I was like, hey, she's like 100 times less blotchy now. She's like becoming.
Oh yeah.
Like, thing about newborn babies is, they've really been through the ringer,
Yeah.
This is what
they got some recovery to do.
They've been soaking in a sack of goo for just so long,
Yeah, their head gets squeezed like an egg.
Yep.
Well, the labor and everything went really well, and Diana did fantastic. And it's been just killing the game as a new mom, which has been awesome to see. And we've been having a ton of fun. But the labor process is one of the things where our family's like, we have a medical family. We're know some things. I've seen babies be born. I've seen some C-sections, etc. But I kind of forgot one particular fact, and also the doctors didn't tell us this too, which is when the baby comes out, their head is basically a weird long oblong, like they're like a Mayan priest. Okay, come out, and that head is just like reaching up to the sky. Because on the way out, they're like, whatever,
through a toothpaste tube.
Yeah, this skull is basically liquid. Let's just let it sort of be whatever shape it needs to be to get out. And so they come out with this like just football head, and not like the movies, all the shows or movies like that baby's a few months old basically when they throw it up on someone. So very funny, very startling. But also didn't somehow, despite how weird that is to see like a very oblong head, it didn't take away from the moment, just the shock of it in terms of being like, Diana and I we were there, and then Diana's pushing, and then they hurl this creature up onto Diana's chest, and we're like, what? It was wild, totally wild. And, we've been home now from the hospital for more than a week, and baby's doing great, Diana's doing great, everybody's doing great. We got a lot of help at the house too, which has been awesome. So I think with all those things put together, we've actually been able to really enjoy it. And then I've not been working. This is like probably this will be the longest stretch of me being at the computer since I left, basically. Just doing a podcast recording for an hour or so. So it's been, I feel very good about both how everything went, and then also the amount of support we have and all that stuff has been allowing us to really actually enjoy ourselves, I think, despite the chaos that enters your life when you got a newborn, which is like feeding a baby every 2 hours is wild. Just a wild fact that you got to do that for a while until they get big enough to, basically they don't have a big enough gut to hold enough food to last them for more than like 2 hours, which is a crazy thing also. You know what I mean? Like,
just coincidentally, I was
be happening synchronously to get them to the point where you're not driven insane by the whole situation is
And it is funny that their gut isn't big enough, given that also their little bodies aren't big enough for their guts. So they all have those little pot bellies, because they're because they have too many guts, but also
it's
too
been
few.
very funny. Now we're like after the baby finishes feeding, then her gut is enormous and it just looks absolutely hilarious. It's like you used to catch bullfrogs and I got that big sort of like floppy gut thing going on. It's basically looks like that. She looks like a bullfrog, gut in that case.
Nice.
Which is hilarious and how she's got it done. But yeah, it's been great. It's been super fun actually, and kind of loving it. Kind of loving it, to be honest. Which is what I was thinking was going to happen, but it's nice that it did, because that's one of those like can't go back. Can't go back with these.
Yeah, you're locked in.
Yeah, you're locked in. So yeah, we've been having a great time, and
and you got lucky with
it's fun.
her too, because she is like just a chill
She's apparently
baby.
a chill baby. A
Yeah, 'cause
chill,
you probably would be
sweet
having
baby.
a lot worse time if she was just screaming constantly and all that.
Oh,
stuff.
yes.
So.
Yes, that's sort of a fact, I think. But yeah, it's been really, really good. So welcome to the world, baby.
Yeah,
Baby. Yeah, congrats. That's
Thank you.
it's been a long journey,
Yeah, yeah.
So, and I think I think it's especially impactful, for you and for everybody else involved, just because, we 10 years ago, we had the cancer diagnosis and none of us really knew if we'd get this far.
You don't know if you're going to get there, and I think that's also one of those things that I think before going through all that stuff, I was still pretty medium on whether or not to have kids. But then it was when someone took the option away from me in that regard, basically put some of my boys on ice, for later. Once I got diagnosed, which was good because I got nothing at this point. Chemo burned me out. So
all your stem cells are fried.
yeah, so I'm very lucky that I did that. As weird as it was at the time, but yeah, it was one of those things. Once someone kind of threatened to take it away, then I was like, I do want. It makes you think about it, right? I do really want that actually. And so,
Well, at least you want to be able to decide.
yeah,
Whether
later
having your choices taken away, I think it does force you to really kind of reckon with what they mean to you.
Yes. Yeah.
So,
and we did have, because of that, then we had to go through IVF. We did have a miscarriage last December, which I don't think I've really talked about too much on the podcast or really anywhere
We
else.
definitely didn't talk about the podcast.
yeah.
Yeah. And that was, for anyone who's ever gone through that, it's just not a good time, as you might imagine. Another kind of a reset in an interesting way for us. But I think having gone through that experience together with, Diane and I made it so that where we were anxious on the first time, and there's a lot of like, is this going to work? Is it going to work? After that miscarriage, sort of like, I don't know, it somehow kind of reset our perspective on stuff. So, when Dinah was feeling some of her worst during the pregnancy and stuff, it was like, well, the reason you're feeling bad is because that baby's doing great, which is always
The
sort of
baby's
like
punching you on the inside.
exactly, and like that's awesome, so good. And so that took a bit of the edge off. And then I think also having gone through that experience and realizing that you don't have a lot of control over how these things are going to go. There's a lot going on in there, and so both of us, I think, were a lot more relaxed for this whole pregnancy then, which has made the whole thing just a lot more enjoyable. And then having the baby out, like it just feels like we're just kind of cruising. We're in a good spot. Very, very thankful for everything. It's gone well, because we know what it's like for it to not go well, which is a different sort of thing. So, miscarriages aren't really talked about for some reason too much, even though they're extremely, extremely common for people. So,
They're extremely common, but extremely
they're very hard.
painful. Yeah. So, like, people you can kind of intellectually look at the statistics, and you can kind of know like, oh, this happens a lot, right? But then, you don't necessarily know whether it has happened to people or whatever, because people don't, you don't want to revisit that.
Absolutely.
It's horrible.
Yeah. So
So-
for anybody who's listening, who's gone through theirs, working through it, it's a thing that once you're through it, I think it adds a layer of useful, even more buoyant perspective to pregnancy stuff and kid stuff going forward, even if it's frankly one of the worst things. It's similar to like, it's like the cancer stuff or whatever else. Any of these traumas where if you manage to kind of wrangle it and get a hold of it, get that post-traumatic growth going, basically, then I think it's in post, then it all kind of shakes out,
Yeah.
It's just not at all fun during. So, I'm
Yeah.
super thankful for where we've ended up and super happy, baby. getting very fat. She got an extra neck roll as of this morning.
An extra? She had already had one?
Well, this is the thing. It's so weird because like you wouldn't, I don't know. I was like, I didn't think you'd actually be able to see them changing in like literally a 24-hour window. But yesterday morning, I took care of her and then hung out with her a bunch and then spent like part of the day basically like planting some shrubs outside and doing some other stuff. Came back around like 4 maybe. And I was like, this baby's head is big. What happened? I was gone for like, what is this? Like I could sense her head is bigger. And then like this morning I came down and looked at her and I was like, she's got an extra neck roll. Like she's packing it on, you know, and her eyelashes are getting long. Like I like feel like it's weird to see something change so fast.
Well, I think it's that everything is so tiny, right? That a thing that otherwise you would never notice on another person is like a huge deal, right? Because like if she gains like 1/10 of a pound, then you can tell, right? Right? But like you yourself, you're probably going up and down 2 pounds throughout the course of the day, but that's like 20% of her body weight.
She's in that phase where her whole biological system is designed to be like she was one cell 9 months ago, which is crazy.
She's working pretty hard. She's doing great, you know. Yeah, she's really putting in those reps.
Like if anything, her changes are like remarkably slow, you know, because
that is fair. But I think so. Last night, then we went to see to hang out with her, and I was like, "What happens, baby's forearm? She's getting that Michelin Man mid forearm crease."
Yeah.
Pretty soon it'll look like all of her body parts are just stuck together like Legos.
Oh, I can't wait. Yeah, she's really packing it on.
Do you know what her caloric intake is? Because it was one of the funny things when we got when we had when we added some kittens to our household, because we have this old cat and some kittens, right? And I assume this is true for human babies also, but I'm curious what the actual numbers are, because we had to feed we had tiny kittens that were like 1/3 the size of our adult cat, right? But they had to eat 4 times as many calories, right?
Yep.
Yeah. And so like net, like by body weight, like the pound per pound like caloric intake was just this. It was like literally like a 10x kind of a thing, you know?
Oh, I'm sure it's just
they're like a little fucking engine. So I'm curious what like a baby's
she went
caloric intake is.
So babies when they come out will typically lose a certain percent of their body weight for the first couple of days, basically, because like they don't know how to eat essentially, and they got to figure that shit out, and it just kind of takes a while to get them to start actually gaining weight again. So even though you might have a baby, the baby's name is Mava. So Mava came out at 7 pounds 9 ounces, right? Over the course of the following 2 days, and then she drops, I think like she basically dropped like 9% of her body weight total, right? Which is well within the usual range. And everyone's like, cool, whatever. It'll fix itself. And then the goal is basically get it back up to body weight within 10, 14 days or so, 2 weeks, right? And what's weird about that, so Mava got it back up to 7 pounds 9 ounces in like 6 or 7 days. So very fast. But again, what's weird about that is like that total amount of weight. It's like if you just lost 10% of your weight in a couple of days and then put it back on in a couple of days.
It's just wild.
Wow. Where is it going? You know, but I guess it's going to those fat rolls. That's where it's going.
I just did a quick Google search just to get a sense. So something like for the first few months, 500 calories per day is what a baby eats, which is a quarter of what a human adult.
Yeah, so a baby weighs like 1/18 or 1/15 of what I weigh, but eats a
quarter of the calories.
A quarter.
Yeah. Wow,
that would be like me. Yeah, that would be like me eating like 6 Big Macs per meal. You know?
Yeah.
You know what the sad part is about this though? It's kind of like because like as you get older and older, your caloric intake just keeps going down, right? In a sad way, it's kind of like your body's like, look, we're done here. You know, like we don't have anything that we're really working toward anymore. We don't need to grow. You know, we don't really need that much energy.
It's like a maintenance routine, basically.
We're barely even need to maintain anymore. Frankly, we're just done.
Yeah, and in fact, we're not gonna.
Yeah,
you know, we're just.
I think that's the wild part, though, is the reality, like how weirdly efficient your body actually is when it comes to that food stuff, right? Like the fact that you who weigh like 170, 180 or something, like you only have to eat. Like you probably could just eat a Big Mac every day and you'd stay roughly the same shape for a very long time. You know what I mean? Which seems crazy. Weird because it's
and I have thought about how it's interesting that what we do is we eat other living things. It's always living things. You can't just eat a rock. You know, like you got to eat something else that was alive, a plant or an animal or something. I guess those are the 2 primary categories.
Fungus.
Flavoured animal. Maybe some third.
Get that
maybe
fungus.
fungus. Yeah. You got to eat something that's alive, and then your chemistry kind of like it turns that into energy that you can use, or it stores it somehow, which sounds really cool and it sounds very efficient and stuff, right? And I sometimes I would think like, oh, it'd be so interesting if you could make like a robot or something that like could eat something, right? But then you'd have robots shitting.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah,
because there actually is a lot of stuff that we eat that actually doesn't end up being absorbed, or like as you're like through the byproduct of all the chemical processes in your body, you're producing all this waste, right?
Actually, I do want to talk about poop for a moment, because not even poop. Here's the thing. Everyone wants to, they're like, get ready to deal with, like, your life starts revolving around, poop, essentially, once you have a kid, right? One thing I did not know about, that somehow I read a few books about what to expect, etc. I had no idea. This is not on my radar. So I'm gonna put this out there for anybody who's having a kid or thinking about it in the future, which is that,
or if you have had it and you've seen this,
you know what I'm talking about,
and you commiserate.
There is a substance called meconium. Okay, this sounds like a very, I don't know, that sounds like a mineral in like a far sci-fi sort of thing that people will be warring over, right?
But it's not though.
It's not though. It's the closest thing I can put to it is, if you imagine what demonic ichor that you maybe have heard about in fantasy novels, or the concept of it, ichor, would be like, to me, meconium is that. And what it actually is when the baby comes out, baby's digestive system hasn't done a damn thing while it's been in the womb, right? There's nothing to do, right?
Yeah, it's just getting straight through the blood.
Yeah. So in their whole digestive system, in their intestinal tract, they have this very weird substance called meconium, which has the like texture of tar. I'm not even kidding. It has the texture of like tar.
So basically, you're saying like the baby poops this out.
It poops. It's almost like
it's not necessarily poop.
It's not poop. It is not poop, because it didn't smell like anything at all.
It's just some kind of weird demon goo.
And the reason it's doing it is because
poop comes later.
It's green. It's green, and I'm not talking like low key, like a little bit of a weird poop green. I mean like fucking green, okay? And this was very freaky because, one of the first things they do is they hurl this baby out onto Diana's chest. You do skin-to-skin contact with the mom for a bit. And then nowadays they also do skin-to-skin contact with the dad. So they're like, here's this baby. So she picks up the baby, and the baby has already done some of this, like, get rid of this meconium stuff. So they kind of wipe up Diana. They barely wipe up the baby. I could see the green stuff on her feet, okay? And they're like, whatever, fuck it. And they just throw this baby on me. And I'm also like, whatever, fuck it, this is amazing. So I'm just sitting here hanging out with this baby. And then when I get up 20 minutes later, I am coated.
Covered in tar.
From the nipple down to the waistline, and just like down my forearm in ichor and tar. And like I went to the bathroom. I went through like, they have those little just like shitty hospital cloths or whatever you wipe your stuff down with. I went through like 7 of them, and I'm like turning beet red because I'm scrubbing my skin so hard to try to get this demonic force off of it. And it was nothing that anybody had said anything about. No, I had never heard of this.
I've heard of the idea that like the first time the baby poops is like very weird and crazy, and it's not what you would expect. Like that's kind of like, that's the most that I kind of knew about it, that it wasn't normal.
Yeah.
Like there's something about that, but I didn't know that, the specifics of why or what that even means.
It was insane. And then it just keeps coming out for a few days while they're kind of, working their stuff. It basically, you transition into like actual.
Yeah. But yeah, it goes through a few phases, right? Because then it turns into like milk poop, which is a different kind of a thing. And then later on it turns into food poop, which is the
milk
worst
poop is
one.
fine. Milk poop it looks like sort of, I would say it looks like turmeric, basically, like wet turmeric.
Yeah.
It's just sort of like it's like a golden poo. I don't even know.
Yeah, once it's food poop, then it's just like any other person's poop, and then now nobody's having a good time because that's
I'm not.
Yeah, just kind of coincidentally, I was listening to some podcast like a week ago, and they were talking. There's people talking about trying to understand like human brains and intelligence and stuff like that, and they were talking about how interesting it is if you look at kind of how certain animals, infants, what they're capable of when they're first born, right? It's like if you're a sort of a prey animal, like a zebra or something, right? Then like they're born and then they just fucking stand right up and they're like, let's go. I'm part of the herd. And so, but I think the theory is that like, so humans, we actually have a big problem, which is our giant heads and brains.
Mm-hmm.
Like our big ass brain is kind of the thing that lets us be humans compared to like any other thing. And that's caused all kinds of problems. Like, you know, our wisdom teeth don't have enough space anymore. It's like we have all kinds of dental problems because our brains got too big. Right. There's this idea that like human babies are born actually dramatically premature. Because they have to be.
They're still fetuses
because their heads are so big. Yeah. So like what we think of as like a baby is actually still pretty. Yeah, it's pretty much a fetus. It's just out in the world now, kind of like how like a kangaroo will have like a baby, like throw it back into the pouch and like let it continue baking.
Well, that was one of the wild ones. We did. Diane and I were looking at other animals, you know, as we were looking at various baby things. And kangaroos, I don't know if you actually know how that shit works, but
wild. Yeah.
If you watch the videos, it's like blow your mind because basically that baby kangaroo is birthed at it's like 2 inches long.
Yeah, and it's an external fetus the whole time.
Yeah. You think a baby is like an external fetus. I mean, this is truly, it's like an external embryo. You know what I mean? Like it's.
Yeah, marsupials in general just do like most of their fetal growth in the pouch.
Yeah, but it comes out and then it climbs through
little clammy pink blob.
Yeah, through the mom's fur and then like dunks itself into the pocket and then grabs a nipple, and that's like how it does its thing. But that it is deaf and blind. It's just like
but in a lot of ways, you know, to me it is kind of similar to a human baby in the sense that like human babies, they can't speak for years even, right? And like they can't really understand, like they're developing the capacity to understand words and stuff, and their vision only goes, like their focal point only goes so far. You know, they can't walk, they can't really do much of anything. But they had to get out because otherwise, you know, if they kept growing for like another year in there, it would not work out, right? And so you kind of like, you got to get them out, and it's also why, you know, your memories don't really start until years after you're born because you were still kind of a fetus, you know.
You don't have the capacity. Like, long-term memory development from like developmental psychology stuff really starts coming along around the age of like 7. And you got some like sprinkling of, you know, episodic stuff here and there, but like you just don't have like your brain is just not done. It's not, you're not born running, you know what I mean, in any sort of way. But I think what's also funny about that is you are born very cute, and not even necessarily like, I guess in the immediate sense, newborns are usually pretty weird.
Yeah, not immediately.
Again, like the weird head shape is very but very quickly become very cute. And so I think it's one of those things where it's like you sort of trade this, like, you can't run, but you can be cute. And apparently that's good enough. You know what I mean? I mean, that survival tactic has worked for many other animals too. You know, like it's like why I have 2 dogs. Yep. You know, and that, you know, your pit bull is just like, her head is so good. Just this giant head. Cannonball head. And you're just like, I love it. I just love this dog. So good. Goes for scratch its head. So good. All right. Well, I mean, big congrats, Sam. That's thank you. You've been through the ringer trying to make this happen, and we did it. You know, I'm proud of you guys for doing all this. I know that it's something that I do not currently have the confidence that I would be able to manage. It is a lot. It is crazy. It's a lot. Yeah, and I think to that end, you know, big thanks also to both my family and Dinah's family for just helping out, because we got both moms on staff currently hanging out with us.
You mean grandmas now?
That's true. Both grandmas. They're pretty pumped about that title. Yeah, we were calling them the mom squad before, but I guess the grandma squad is probably more appropriate. And the dads are visiting this week too, and so it's kind of all hands on deck thing, especially for the first few weeks. It's just wild. I mean, baby also randomly will go through these growth spurts where, like last night, she just ate every hour, you know, for like 8 hours straight. Of course, in the middle of the night, because why not? And so it's the best time. It just happens. You'll get a really good routine going, and the baby's like, "It's time for me to Super Saiyan. I'm gonna, you know, become Goku, hold a spirit ball up for like 3 days or something
Yeah.
crazy, and that's just kind of how you got to do it. And
You know,
she's gonna
in
do
her
it.
mind, you guys are the weird ones because like she's never even heard of the concept of day and night until just like a week ago.
That's
you
fair.
know?
That
So
is fair.
she's like, I thought it was just dark and cramped. I thought that's just what life was. You know, turns out there's light. I don't know. Why do I have to
the fuck
adjust
is
my
this?
schedule around this crap?
Well, just wait, daylight savings is like today, so
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
or tonight.
Well, you know, we always have our biannual, twice a year.
Yep.
Rant about how stupid daylight savings time is. So we'll just say it's stupid.
It's stupid. There you go.
Biannual could be every 2 years, though. So
It could be. I don't
I
actually.
think biweekly and biannual are just those are terms just cross off the list.
Semi-annual. Yeah, we'll do that.
Mm-hmm.
All right, let's talk about. All right, so we want to get on to some questions, but first we just want to kind of put a pin in the fact that there's a bank run apparently happening in San Francisco, or Silicon Valley.
Silicon Valley
Silicon
Bank.
Valley Bank,
Silicon Valley Bank, SVB.
SVB. Don't know all the specifics of that. It just started happening. I do know. I will kind of say a little bit about just the concept of a bank run and what it.
What does this
kind of what it
mean?
means? All right. So the thing about banks is that they don't actually have your money.
Mhm.
Okay.
They've lent it out.
Yeah. So in a kind of if you think about it this way, let's say like Adam, Sam, and I, let's say the three of us we're the whole economy.
Perfect.
Okay. It's just the three of us, and I've got $100.
Mhm.
Okay. So I'm like, ooh, I want to save this and, blah, blah, blah. So I go to the bank. I put my $100 in the bank. Well, the bank, they make their money by loaning my money out to other people. That's the only way that they really make money
Or
is
by
take the
buying
money.
other things that somehow give them money later, right?
Yeah.
With that
But what do
money.
they buy it with?
Yeah, your money. Yeah.
Your money, right? Right. It's like the bank doesn't have money. They have everybody else's money. So the bank has my $100, and then Sam is like, I want to buy a really nice popsicle.
Yep.
Okay. I have a new business idea where I buy a popsicle and eat it, but it's a really expensive one, and I need like $50.
Yep.
Okay. So Sam goes to the bank and he fills out a loan application and they give him $50, right? So Sam has $50. If I go to the bank and I ask how much money's in my account, they'll say $100, right? Because they're just playing a shell game. They're just moving stuff around.
They're just
So
they're just a Ponzi scheme.
Yeah. So Sam wants to buy his popsicle. Well, where's he going to buy it from? He's going to buy it from Adam, the popsicle salesman.
I'm the
right?
popsicle man.
So Sam is like, hey, is he going to back alley? And Sam's like, hey, I heard you got the best fucking popsicles.
And I
Like a
open,
50
my, I
big
open my
ones.
trench coat and I've got these.
and it's just sopping wet with melted popsicles.
And I'm like, I'll take the least melted one you got.
Yeah. And so Sam buys the popsicle from Adam. They exchange, and Adam gets $50. And then Adam is holding his $50. And he's like, oh my God, I got to put this in the bank. This is my money. I don't want to just be carrying around all this money. So Adam goes to the bank, puts his $50 in, right? So there is $100 in this economy, period, right?
Yep.
But the bank now has $150 worth of deposits.
Yep.
So if Adam and I both went to the bank on the same day and we said, hey, we want to withdraw all of our money, the bank would
give it
say,
Yeah.
sorry, we don't have it because only one of us can get our money out because there actually isn't that much money. And this concept kind of works in a whole bunch of dimensions in the economy of like how credit cards work and all this stuff. The entire economy is built on this thing called a money multiplier, which is that for every actual physical dollar that is added to the economy, every paper dollar, there's actually something like 10 times as much money gets produced from it.
In the form of these loans or
In the form of debts,
Yeah,
basically.
because as the money moves around like that, then you have this kind of multiplication effect going on. And so the scale of that multiplier is totally dependent on the laws that dictate how much banks have to keep in reserve. So if a bank has a 10% reserve rule, then that means that they can only loan out so much money such that they always have at least 10% of it still on hand, as actual physical cash. Still, though, that means that no matter what, like even if it was like a 90% requirement, right? It still means that they don't actually have everybody's money on hand at once.
It's basically
right?
in order to get the value and the usefulness out of something like these loans or financing. Basically, someone being able to come up and say, "Hey, I don't have money, and I would like some money to see if I can get more money with it." In the same way that banks are doing, almost. You have to determine what that risk, essentially, what that risk limit is for something like a bank, right? And then it is just a case that if everybody happens to pull their money out, essentially under any scenario, then even if you had, like you said, even if it was just a 10% thing or even a 90%, like say they had to hold 90% of the money, if both of you went in, someone's going to lose a chunk of their change.
A bank run is just when more people are trying to take more money out than the bank actually has on hand.
Yes.
Right.
Yes. So then,
and just how likely it is to happen depends on that proportion. It depends on how freaked out people are, because the more freaked out they get, the more likely to take the money. And then the thing that freaks them out is the sense that the money isn't going to be there. Right.
Which everybody means starts piling in.
It's already like, it turns a scenario that's already fragile. It basically guarantees that the whole thing collapses, and actually that's what happened. So as in, like, Seth, you're saying like, oh yeah, well, like the run, it's literally done now. Like it was a 30-hour fucking window where this started for this SVB bank, which is, it has like $150 billion in people's money. Right. And again, it doesn't have it.
Well, it doesn't. It doesn't have the problem,
but it has it. Like people believe that it has that much money on them, right? And basically what they did is they put a huge fraction of it into some kind of an asset that depended on the fact that interest rates from the government were really low, which is rapidly becoming less true. And so then they were like, oh no, what do we do with this money now to try to offset this problem, right? And then they basically put out some notices to investors, and they did a bad job of those. That freaked people out. So then the investors started to, like, their stock price started to go down. So then, and this is all like Silicon Valley Bank, right? So it's people who are so fucking focused on money stuff, right?
Capital.
And so basically everybody got spooked a few times in a row over the course of like a day.
Yep.
And all of a sudden the stock price plummeted. And all of a sudden everybody's like, hey, get your money out of SVB because it looks like it's going to be a problem, right? But the amount of money that everybody has in there is enormous because it's all of these, and like it's like Roblox like has its money, has $100 million in there, right? And like this kind of stuff, right? So all of a sudden people are just yanking out enormous sums of money. And the more they do that, the closer you're getting to the bank not having any money. Right. And so everybody's panicking more. And within literally a 30-hour window, there was like the first inkling of like, oh no. And now the FDIC has taken over that bank. Yeah. It's gone.
So then what is the
bank is gone already.
Yeah. Well, this is a good question. Like what happens to like maybe a regular person in these contexts usually? And it's like the reason the FDIC is so useful is because you might see, if you ever have been in a physical bank, which maybe people haven't been for a long time because, COVID stuff, but you do everything digitally for the most part. But there's these little plaques usually that you'll see like on the bank tellers, like right up next to the window or whatever else, where it just says like FDIC insured. Or if you see your accounts for Bank of America, whatever else might say FDIC insured. The government basically says, okay, for account holders, we are insuring up to $250,000 of your money. We're basically saying that you won't lose that money in the event of a bank run at this institution because the
government says we'll take taxpayer money, right? And we'll
basically take money that you put in the system, and maybe your neighbors did too, and then we'll fill you back up.
We'll redistribute it while the bankers run off with their $100 billion in bonuses.
Exactly. Yeah, at least up to that amount, right? Now the thing is that's not just because you have your money in a bank. It's not necessarily the case that the FDIC is insuring every account, right? So in the case of this Silicon Valley Bank situation too, I believe it was a case that I think you said like 93% of the total value.
Yeah, the vast majority. And again, it's because all the accounts are huge, right? Because you actually cannot get insurance for huge sums of money because, which is, I think reasonable, as you should be able to insure. Because like the way that insurance comes is from the government. So it's basically putting taxpayers on the hook for if you're a huge company and you put $100 million into one bank and then that bank itself does a bunch of risky stuff and the whole thing collapses. Like there's a reason why we have FDIC and all this stuff in the first place, which is, and this all comes from like the 1930s and stuff, right? When we didn't have this stuff and like the amount of
the last societal
chaos was enormous, right? And so this is really good for like your just normal person. Like it's sufficient because most people do not, the vast majority of people,
most people don't have $250,000 of cash.
Yeah. Yeah. And even if you do have a lot of money, you can like set up multiple accounts at multiple banks, and like there's all kinds of ways you can actually get that number like quite a bit up, but you can't get it to $100 million. That's not happening. And so because the amounts of money that were in this bank were these just relatively small numbers of relatively enormous accounts, right? Then the vast majority of that money is just uninsured money, which means
so it's kind of like,
technically just gone unless the government comes in and says, hey, special exception, we're going to use taxpayer money anyway. Right. But there's literally like, again, it's $100-something billion of money that's now gone. Right. So if the government does decide to come in and actually like try to rescue all of the people whose money was in there and like pay it back out. Right. That means basically like it's the equivalent of like more money than our government spends on almost anything good. Right. Is then we'll suddenly have to get paid out because this bank collapsed. So that's wild.
Well, I think there have been a lot of moments in my life where I've kind of like learned about how something in the world works, and I kind of step back and I'm like, seriously though?
Yeah,
like,
it's so dumb. It's just so dumb.
And this is one of them. Or inflation is another example where it's kind of like so many things about what we view as kind of like a very stable, modern economy, a modern society. They only keep going so long as nobody looks too hard at them and nobody panics, right? So like inflation is another thing where if people think that inflation is going to be 15%, right, then they make a whole bunch of different decisions about what to do with their money.
It's better to spend your money.
Yeah. So you're like, oh shit, I don't want to just have cash. I got to like buy some stuff. Right. And so people buy stuff. And as the demand for stuff goes up, the price of things go up. Right. And then if you're like, oh God, the inflation's going to be really high, you're going to go to your employer and ask for a raise and, to match the expected inflation. And then you're going to have more money, but you don't want to hold the money because inflation. So you buy stuff.
all these things going well essentially amounts to requiring a large amount of psychological safety somehow being communicated amongst everyone. Sort of the populace.
And a lot of regulation of all of the systems involved to prevent things from suddenly changing or to prevent things from being so fragile that a little bump can cause the whole thing to, domino style collapse because, I mean, that's what happened in all of our different crises in like 2008 and then more recently. Right.
Yeah. And there's always people who are able to kind of find cracks in the system and like get a crowbar in there and start prying it open and like squeeze a bunch of money out of it. Right. But yeah, it's pretty wild that, humans are very slippery, and I don't think you can actually like safely regulate stuff like this.
No, you can't. No, but I think we have like this active push towards deregulating it further, right? Because the reason that we've had the collapses that we have had to the extent that we've had them is basically because of how loose things have been made, right? Like we haven't had a case that I know of where overregulation was the cause of a disaster, economic or otherwise, right?
Yeah. Well, I think the on the flip side, kind of what happens if you overregulate something is kind of nothing happens.
Yeah.
Right. Because it's like if it becomes too hard to just do stuff, then people just stop.
Yeah. You got
a lot fewer people do stuff.
Yeah.
Right?
But people are so like terrified of like, oh no, what if? And again, it's because of the obsession with growth, right? Because the way that the whole system has to work is as a Ponzi scheme. Like literally, it requires we call Ponzi schemes like the actual Ponzi scheme like bad, but it works the same way the whole fucking economy works, right? It's not hiding behind any like, oh, this is how we've always done it though, kind of like things, right? And it actually because the fact that people don't know that like the average person does not know that the bank doesn't have your money actually, right? In the same way that like under a Ponzi scheme, like by the definition of the term, an investor doesn't know.
They also don't have your money.
They don't have your money, but it's still the same fucking thing, right? And like the whole system depends on this. It requires growth for that to work. So like,
and trust, right?
And trust.
Yeah. Well, and we've all kind of agreed that, and mathematically, if you want to, for example, be able to get loans, right, then sort of by definition, this is kind of how it has to work, right? Yeah. And so yeah, you're right. That like people get overly freaked out about the idea of regulating things because like it's going to be too hard for anybody to do anything. It's like no, it's you gotta. It reminds me a lot of when we talk about security practices, right? Yeah, where it's like you'll have a website that'll be like, oh yeah, you've got to change your password every 6 months. And like, what do people do? Well, they just like put a 1 at the end of their password. And then the next time they put a 2 at the end of their password. And so you'll put these kinds of things in place that people just kind of like view it as an annoyance, and then they don't participate in like the rationale behind the thing. And it actually makes, in some cases, you can make things less secure or worse than what your intent was, because you didn't plan out the regulatory concept well enough. So there's always this balance to walk. Like, you need to have these protections in place. But you also need them to be loose enough that people can still do stuff. And, no matter what you do, you're going to have moments like this, right? Where like,
question of like, what's your margin for error, or for shit hitting the fan, right? And how do you keep that? How do you get that as low as possible while still preserving the upside? Like, financing has a tremendous upside to it. Like, there's not really a doubt about that. But
that's how people get their homes with mortgages.
But how do you make it so that tremendous upside doesn't have, like, I don't know, a routine crash every 10 years, that'd be nice.
There certainly will be one. And you just have to think about the cost benefit, it's just like in the aggregate, what's the loss, what's the gain overall, and where are the losses and gains? Who gets hit by them and who doesn't, and so it's all pretty weird.
And this is all very early. Again, like, this just happened, I think, like yesterday. So,
the big question, because it propagated through like the rest of the banking and finance sector, where like everyone's stocks went down a bit, and like, and all that. So, because it basically panicked because like as soon as that happens once, everybody starts to panic. And so the core problem with a bank run is that the whole fucking system is really fragile, right? And as Seth said, there's way less money that you've put into that system than you can get back out at quickly.
It's like
in a moment.
And so, as people panic, then they start to exacerbate the problem. So and this is actually why it's like the reason this all happened in a 30-hour span, and the FDIC already just took over and now owns that, just has that bank now, right? Is because like the FDIC works over weekends when these things happen, right? Because they solve every bank collapse, which are really rare these days, right? But they solve every single one within like a few days, right? And the reason is because if they
do not fuck around.
If they don't, the dominoes start going, and they don't stop until everyone's trying to pull their money out, and all the money is gone, all the banks have collapsed, and that's it, right? And so, so they work really fast, and they did, right? And we'll see what comes next, right? But I don't know. My opinion on this whole thing is that like the reason that all this stuff is so fragile is not just by design, because it is, but like you're saying, like a lot of this is necessary for the way that we've designed our whole social and economic system, right? Like we have to have something like these systems. But if people just didn't have this much money, if that gulf wasn't so huge, right? Because the problem is like you can't insure somebody's got $1 billion, right? But if the person loses $1 billion, they put that money like in all these different places, where now all those other places that say they have that $1 billion that they don't actually have used it to do something, right? And so like the dominoes start to fall with a small number of it's just not distributed well. So that a small, because the reason that so much money is in here and so much of it's uninsured, all that kind of stuff, is because it's all Silicon Valley investors throwing huge amounts of money at startup companies, right? And if nobody had that insane amount of money, right, then you wouldn't have this fragile of a system. Like it's really expensive to humanity to prop up billionaires, right? Like it's incredibly expensive and dangerous for these people to just exist because they make all of these systems extremely fragile.
No, what's the saying? It's like, if you owe the bank $1,000, that's your problem. If you owe the bank $1 billion, that's their problem.
Right? Yeah, that's exactly right.
There are certain amounts of money where, it's just not collectible and it's not enforceable. And there's no institution big enough that could come in and like
eat that,
do anything about the fact that you have $1 billion and don't want to give it back to somebody, or can't or whatever. So it's pretty wild. Some things, I guess, moral of the story, some things don't scale that well. And this is one of those times. So, all right, well, I think we got time for maybe a question.
Depends on Sam. Sam, do you hear any baby sounds? Do you hear any?
I hear no screams.
No screams?
We're safe. No screams.
We're safe for now.
Yeah.
Give it a shot.
I would also say if I was hearing screams in the other room, I would also be like, we should probably wrap this episode.
That's far more dangerous.
That's kind of horrifying, actually.
Yeah, definitely.
If I just started hearing screams from somewhere else in the house, but I'm alone. So that's
It would be weird.
That's way
creeping
worse.
myself out.
Yeah, that's way worse.
Yeah. All right. Well, question comes from JohnFlavin, who says, "What's your opinion on jokey pun sequel names, and would you ever use one in a game? Can we expect a Crashlands 2 TOO, as in also, which features multiplayer or something, or Crashlands 2 TO, as in you're going somewhere, I guess? Somewhere in the far future, where we get the third installment in the series, Crashlands 3D, which is, of course, built in a full 3D engine.
Mm-hmm.
We have talked about that.
Yeah,
we've
given our
actually
humor,
joked
you
about
would
all
not be
these.
surprised. Yeah, that every single one of these, plus 1,000 related ones, have already come up as
I think
It would probably be like Crashlands 3, and then there'd be like a tiny little D like next to the 3 or something.
yeah, I think the challenge always comes down to a searchability.
yeah, it's,
Actually,
it's always a marketing problem.
because if someone goes and looks for Crashlands 2, like the fuzziness of these algorithms is not such that if I type Crashlands 2 into Steam with a 2, but it's actually TOO.
Number 2. Yeah.
There's no fuzziness on that second word that'll get you you know what I mean? Like that makes it really hard to actually find stuff. So that's the only reason why we haven't done it, because we had a bunch of really dumb good sequel names that were basically these. I think the other one was Crashlands 2 Subtitle.
Yeah, that was when we had kind of a different
Subtitle.
overall picture of the story and stuff. Which
was SUBTIDAL, as
the
in
tide.
beneath the tides.
Yeah.
You know, as in like
it was going to be
it's
kind of
some
like a
underwater
quadrupus.
stuff.
Like there was like kind of a vibe going on with that.
Yeah.
But really, the only reason the story was going to go that way was because the pun was
Because the title was so good.
Yeah, well, because we were talking about like what would the subtitle be for
Crashlands 2.
the sequel, and we're like, subtitle.
Let's go into the ocean. Let's go. So I do want to put that one on reserve, and then the Crashlands 3D, or if it's 3 and then the subtitle of it starts with a D, such that at least from an abbreviation standpoint, we could still claim that. You know, I want to reserve all of these because they're just dumb and great, but it's also hard to invest. You know, I don't know, millions of dollars into making a thing where you're like, is this pun going to cause a search engine? Are we being too cute?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? For our own good.
There's a whole. This is why we can't have nice things. There's always that angle on everything that happens.
Or
you know?
dumb things in this case, you know.
Yeah.
Nice is maybe.
I mean, nice, is like just something you want. You know, I want everything to be dumb puns because that makes life worth living. You know,
It really does.
but search engines
And
are like,
dumb
I don't get it.
dumb things then require, like, if we make the thing dumb, then we're kind of like offloading the smartness onto other people. Like, other people
That's
have to
true.
be smart enough to figure out that it's purposely dumb and why it's dumb, you know? So in some cases we have to just make things boring and what you would expect is what I mean by that. So that people can find them.
Yeah, I also like the idea of Crashlands and then an ellipsis and then again. But I think, it's similarly, it's like, is it 2 or is this a remaster?
Yeah, somebody says, I want to play Crashlands again.
Exactly. You can't talk about it anymore.
It's already hard to say. I want to play Crashlands 2. It's like, is that because I'm playing Crashlands?
Yep.
Is that why you want to do that?
Yeah. What do we
Yeah,
say?
I mean this problem exists, in English, which we started to do some planning and stuff about localization, and we're meeting with some people to start to triangulate what we need to be doing with all that stuff, and it is always kind of interesting to hear perspectives on people who are translating things in other languages, and they have to be super sharp about these things because they'll sort of like pick up on a pun or a joke that we made that legit, like, it only makes sense in English.
Yeah, puns.
Or in some cases it only makes sense in the US, because
yeah.
of some cultural reference or something.
Puns are
Or
not.
just the Midwest,
Or yeah.
They're not translatable directly. You know what I mean? It's not going to make any sense.
And so that, like, what a translator will do is they got to be real sharp, because they basically need to, first of all, recognize the joke. They have to get kind of the cultural context, or kind of like the,
Why it's funny.
the overall, and why is this funny, right? And then they've got to kind of,
but it's 2 levels though. It's not just why is this funny, like literally, like why is this pun funny or whatever, but also why is this funny in the context of the whole, like, the big picture. Like, does it need to be funny? Like,
Right.
yeah, does there have to be a joke here?
Yeah.
Or can I?
and if there does, like, what is the goal of the joke actually? Right.
Yeah. So, let's say you got like 2 characters talking, and at one point in the conversation, a character like says something funny about their pet dog or something, right? And it's like, as the translator's looking at that and they're like, okay, well, clearly this is like a lighthearted conversation that has a joke in it, right? Is it okay if the joke is in a completely different place and about a completely different thing,
Right.
so long as the conversation overall is lighthearted and funny, or do we have to preserve that exact joke somehow?
And then even if
translate
that's the case, then like now you got to just come up with a different entire pun in the other language, which just means it's going to be a different thing entirely. You know what I mean? Like it's just not.
Yeah.
It's not. Yeah, there's no such thing as direct translation, right? It's just not.
Yeah, and which is why we call it localization, because it's making the game local to some other place. It's not just about like change the words, right? Because there's cultural context that has to be built. Like if you think making a game is hard, like try translating one, try localizing one. And also,
I can see why for people who are into it, why it would be very fun. Like in terms of like it's such like an intellectual puzzle to try to figure out how to like convert that stuff. But you have to be into it, because if you're not into it, that's way too hard to try to make yourself.
Well, but on top of that, it's a lot of what you're going to be doing if you're on a localization team is not necessarily that work. It's the tedium of figuring out how to get all the information and how to deliver all the information. Because one
technical aspects of this is just
that's the big thing that we're starting to try to start working on with Crescents too right now.
Like if you're a translator and somebody sends you a text string, like we need this translated, and then the text string is like, wow, I can't believe he said that. That's crazy. And that's it, right? Then you're just like, what?
Yeah.
What are they talking about?
Is this the punchline in a joke? Who's he?
Yeah. Is this sarcastic or is this like surprised?
Are they mad? What was said?
Yeah. And so the problem is what you're translating is just a line of text, but there's a huge amount of context. And this is something that people have said for a long time of like why natural language processing is so hard for computers, because words just don't mean things.
They mean
in the absence of context.
Yeah. It's about the stream, right? The whole stream. And so
the whole thing.
That's also why language is so redundant, right? Because like there's things that we get really annoyed about with like, English, for example, because it's like, if you say the number of something, why do you also have to change the form of the word after it so it ends with an S, right? Because it's like we already said there's some number of it. Why do we also change and like, of course, other languages have even much more wild versions of that, where the word changes form like a million times, right? And it's like, and we also have to like put the things in a certain order, even though that's already reinforced by something else and all this other kind of stuff, right? And we have to.
And meanwhile, you've got pants that are singular and plural at the same time.
Well, it's because it's an evolved system, right? So like it's messy, but the mess is this really like highly redundant, as Sam said, a stream of information, right? Because it's the low information density of like a word or even a sentence, right? Is what requires all these different mechanisms of like grammatical order and things that are partially redundant, so that something sounds like a plural word and then also has a number in front of it, like so that those reinforce each other, right? Like the whole system works together to then convey, still pretty poorly, right? Like a single concept or thought or whatever. And you can't just yank that out of something and be like, okay, I've got this word now. Translate the word freedom. It's like, what do you mean?
To where and why? Where? Who's saying it and why are they saying it? Yeah. So that's always a big challenge. And if you ever played a game or something that had kind of janky translations for things,
this is why
there's a decent chance that jank is actually not the fault of the person doing the translating. There was some kind of a process problem where the person doing the translating couldn't get enough information about it. Like one of the things we learned was that apparently when they were doing the voice acting for Oblivion, the voice actors were given all of their lines in alphabetical order. So there may be like a whole conversation
trying to infer. Yeah, you're just like reading, in effect, random lines, right? Imagine
just
trying to infer
lines.
What you're supposed to imply in the emotion and tone of the thing as you're,
you
wild.
can't.
Yeah, and the thing is, like, it worked well enough that it was fine. but you know, the amount of sort of assumptions that you've got to then make as a voice actor or whatever about what things mean is, you know, you're just going to miss sometimes because how could you not?
I mean, it's like the difference between, you know, where you're using voice to enrich the like immersion of the experience in that context, but that's about as far as it goes versus like if you look at God of War Ragnarok now and these, you know, they're filming with live actors in these volumes that everyone is there doing things together. And that's actually what makes the acting possible in a way that's so much better than what you would usually get from just like people in a recording booth. In this case,
because acting is reacting, right? It's like you are responding to the things around you when you're acting. And of course, if you're just getting your lines in alphabetical order, you just read through them all in an afternoon. Like you're not reacting to shit. You're just saying stuff. You know? So it's a tough problem. I'm sure we'll have more to say about localization stuff as we kind of like stumble across some of our new specific to Crashlands 2 kinds of problems. That'll be kind of interesting to see. All right, well, that's all the time that we have. You know, Sam's got to get back to this
I gotta go
new
cuddle this baby.
Baby duties.
So we'd like to thank our producers Fat Bard and Sampa DaCosta for putting the podcast together, and thanks to our community moderators who keep our Discord running. To get more involved in the community, you can just go to podcast.bscotch.net, where we have links to the Discord, a way for you to donate, and links to the archives. Thank you all for listening, and we'll see you next week.
Bye.
Bye.